You know how you have a nightmare and you wish you could go back? I know vaguely how I got to this place, but there are pieces that are missing.
Can you tell us who we have there? Who is that?
Sasha was an extraordinary child. He was very interactive. He was very present.
He started asking for the camera more often.
I'm sorry I did something bad, okay?
Why do you have all of this footage?
They're happy moments. Every time I videotaped you guys, it was all that. Now, when I look at them, I see it in the background. Stuff was going on.
Sasha would seem withdrawn. His behavior became scary.
Turn off the thing!
He was completely unpredictable.
Quiet!
Why did we come to this tree?
You were expressing that something was awful and you didn't want to continue living.
Sasha was frightened to death.
If you tell, I'll kill you.
That was the first time you disclosed that any abuse had occurred.
This is the drawing.
That started the whole show. When you have two attorneys that have an unlimited supply of funds, they can file a lot of motions.
And that was really the first window into the kind of power that this individual held.
Did you do what he said you did?
Speak to my lawyer.
It was going to be an all-out war against you.
To lock up somebody like that, you have to start getting all your ducks in a row.
Sasha's first reaction was, we're going to go to trial. It's all or nothing.
They tried every which way to confuse you.
This child has put different faces and different names on these kinds of allegations.
This case really wasn't about sex. It was about power.
This whole revisiting all of this has kind of displaced me.
Why didn't you come to me and tell me?
It's a puzzle made from my life, and I have to put that puzzle back together if I'm ever going to really move on.
Incredible courage from that little boy.
Don't give up on me yet.
Good evening. I'm Jen Wostrom, a trustee here at the Mark Twain Library, and I'm honored to welcome you to this, the third and final program in our series, Discover Documentaries. Filmmaker Cindy Meehl has generously taken us behind the lens of two of her documentaries, The River and the Wall and The Dog Doc. Both of these programs were recorded and are on the Mark Twain Library's YouTube channel, so if you missed them and you want to catch up with one of our community's most talented residents, please do. As for this evening's program, we do welcome input from you all. If you'd like to ask a question or make a comment, please type them into the chat and we will try to get to them before the end of what promises to be an unforgettable conversation with these two amazing guests. It is my true pleasure to welcome back my friend Cindy Meehl. Cindy started her career in films in 2008 when she created Cedar Creek Productions and began work on her documentary feature, Buck. Buck was Meehl's directorial debut. It premiered at the Sundance Film Festival in 2011, where it won the Documentary Audience Award and was shortlisted for the Best Documentary at the 2011 Academy Awards. That is not called beginner's luck, people. That's genius. Since then, she has been a very involved executive producer on a range of critically acclaimed films, including The River and the Wall, For the Birds, a fascinating film, which is currently on Netflix, Trapped, which premiered at the 2016 Sundance and won Jury Prize for Social Impact, and was shown on PBS and awarded a Peabody. Cindy also executive produced Unbranded and Dogs on the Inside. Most recently, she directed and produced The Dog Doc, which premiered at the 2019 Tribeca Film Festival, along with Rewind. She had 2 films at Tribeca that year. Amazing. She is currently working with a local animal rescue agency called DAWS, hoping to raise awareness and dollars to help upgrade their facility. Cindy is a mother of 2 beautiful daughters. She lives right here in Reading with her husband, Brian. 2 big dogs, a very handsome cat, a horse, and a bunch of chickens. Welcome, Cindy Meehl.
Thank you so much for having me. I am humbled to be here.
Sasha Joseph Neulinger's interest in film started in early childhood. due in no small way to his father's personal and professional passion for filmmaking. After finishing film school at Montana State University, Sasha began work on Rewind as not only the subject, but as the director. And the film was chosen for the 2019 Tribeca Film Festival and received special jury mention. In May 2020, Rewind had its United States television premiere on PBS's Independent Lens, bringing the film into 280 million households nationwide, Critics' Choice and Emmy nominated, and now streaming on multiple platforms, including Amazon Prime. Rewind continues to fight against child abuse every single day. In 2016, Sasha founded Voice for the Kids, bringing his inspirational message to hundreds of millions of people, both domestically and internationally. Both with his public speaking engagements and Rewind, Sasha's doing everything he can to make an impact in the fight against child abuse. Sasha's also co-founder and head of production at Step One Films, where he produces content for commercial clients nationally. He lives in Montana with his wife, Lauren, and his dog, Rocky. It is such an honor to introduce and welcome Sasha Joseph Neulinger.
Thank you very much. I'm honored to be here, and it's great to see Cindy again as well, and really looking forward to this conversation.
Well, then let's dive in, shall we? So you graduated from college in 2013 and you contacted your dad and you asked for all of the videos. Is that because you had a bunch of questions, or obviously you had a bunch of questions and you needed to fill in blanks?
Yeah, so, when I left Pennsylvania in 2008 for film school, I got to Montana, and that was the first time in my life, the first 4 consecutive years of my life without abuse being the primary focus of my existence since the years of birth through 4. So it was a huge opportunity for me to kind of rebuild my life and recognize that despite the trauma, I had life ahead of me. But, despite my best efforts, and I think a lot of great things happened during my time in college, I had a great education and I got to enjoy the mountains, there were still a lot of unresolved pieces that I was holding inside of myself that were preventing me from truly moving forward, from intimacy, from healthier relationships, from having a deeper relationship with myself that was healthy. And so, I was kind of at a crossroads right after graduating. I was actually working with Grizzly Creek Films, who also worked on this film, and was working on a show with Nat Geo. And I was so excited to be on that project, but while I was working on that project, I was dealing with self-doubt issues. And I just realized, like, if I didn't stop what I was doing right now and deal with my past, the unresolved issues, then it would follow me around for the rest of my life. And I figured I'd start finding answers in the home video. And once I watched the home video, once my dad sent me the tapes, after watching 6 of those tapes, I realized that this wasn't only going to be my avenue into uncovering and resolving issues from my past, but this was going to be a documentary that would have the potential to bring this conversation to center stage.
Was he reluctant at all to send him, or did he just say, okay, here they come, 200 hours?
Yeah, he was really supportive, and it could have all stopped right there. My dad could have, his vulnerability, it's a vulnerable position to be in, to send all of those tapes. And actually he said, maybe I should look through them first. And, I know your abusers are in some of the tapes, like maybe I should look at that and edit it. I was like, no, I want to see everything raw. And he just, a few days later, he sent them via UPS or FedEx or whatever. And then I just started going through the tapes, and I was sneaking in to MSU at the time. So I was a server at Buffalo Wild Wings. I was a production assistant / editing assistant at Grizzly Creek Films. And then when I had moments of spare time, I'd sneak into this little dusty closet at this university where they had these old decks that they weren't using anymore with like teeny little screens, and I was just sweating in the middle of the night looking through tapes and starting to digitize. And that's, it's amazing how much has happened since those early days.
And when did you open the door and bring the Grizzly Creek guys in and say, you know what, I think I might have something here?
Yeah, so again, I was 23 years old. I watched the first 6 tapes, and right after those 6 tapes, I knew I had a film that I was going to make. Yeah. And so I think I had like $1,000 in my bank account, and I just spent all of it to fly me and one of my film buddies that I went to school with to Pennsylvania. And we filmed some very brief, quick interviews, with Detective Warren, with Risa Furman, with some of the people you see in the film. And we cut together this pitch video. And once I had that pitch video, I brought it to Grizzly Creek Films. We were starting to raise some money, but once Tom at Grizzly Creek, once he saw the pitch video we put together, he asked if I'd be interested in having his help. And then I didn't have to sneak into the little closet anymore. I had a setup, which was great. And from there, we were hustling. We did a Kickstarter campaign. The biggest thing about this film is, completely independent. And I was a 23-year-old. So raising funds was challenging, but, we believed in our story, and through different kind of milestones along the way, we were able to bring this film to the screen. And meeting Cindy was the most significant part of that journey, being able to bring this film to the world in the way that we have.
Well, that was going to be my next question, Cindy. When did you get involved? But I also want to say, when I watched Rewind again the other night, I noticed in the crawl that you listed every single person that donated to the Kickstarter campaign, which I don't know if anyone else, if that's a thing, but I thought it was so lovely that you did that. So enter Cindy Meehl. How did that happen, Cindy Meehl?
Well, and I wanted to say about the Kickstarter, from what I remember, that was one of the most successful Kickstarters ever, wasn't it? I mean, normally people often do list the people who donated in a Kickstarter, but that many says a lot, right, Sasha? It was just an extraordinary amount of people.
We had close to 4,000 people who individually donated through the Kickstarter. And so we were the 6th most backed documentary in Kickstarter history at that time. Yeah, I mean, it was incredible. I mean, and watching it kind of explode, realizing, and at the time, there weren't any big films out about this topic. This was 2013, it took us longer to make our film than it would have with a big studio, because we were doing piecemeal. But when we came out with this story, Upworthy did an article about it, and that's really what brought the Kickstarter to the next level. But I received, in 1 week, that took a week to get our asking goal. I received thousands of personal messages from survivors around the world. And, today, and from all the work I've been doing, I think it was important to bring that story to the forefront and contribute to the conversation of, hey, child abuse and rape, it's perpetuated by stigma and shame and the silence that comes from those emotions. And it may be uncomfortable, it may be messy, it may be really hard, but we have to have these conversations, because if we don't, it just continues.
Mm-hmm. Clearly.
Yeah. Well, and then it was the producer that I worked with from Unbranded, who is in Montana and head of the film school where you were sneaking into, if I recall. And this was a student of Dennis's. So Dennis sent me this film. I was working on The Dog Doc and another film at the time, River in the Wall, maybe. And and so I thought, well, I would never make this film. This isn't in my wheelhouse. I have no idea. It just seemed so foreign. My films are about animals and stuff. And so I thought I'll just watch a few minutes and then tell Dennis politely, this isn't my kind of film, or I couldn't do it. It was students, I mean, I was like, what? But it was a friend of mine. Dennis is a good friend. So I started watching it. I mean, in 5 minutes, you're just immediately hooked into the story. It was so extraordinary and so profound to see this child. I mean, what makes it so important is that it's not a talking head telling you something that happened. You are seeing a child on the screen, that this happened to, and you literally see this transformation. And I honestly thought, well, of course I watched the whole thing, and I was stunned by the end of it. And I just couldn't wrap my brain around it. It's like, wait a minute, this is such an important story. And for the first time, I felt like I really understood something about this issue. Like, I suppose in my naivete that I always thought, well, that couldn't really happen. Like, these are kids that it wouldn't happen in somebody's house. That must be really rare that any kind of abuse would happen with the mother there or something. And I was so stunned by it. And I literally called Dennis that day. And I remember I just signed on to it the same day I saw it. I couldn't get over how powerful it was and how I felt that everyone should see this film, because everyone is around kids. Everyone, either you have kids, you have a niece or a nephew, your teacher, there's just so many places where you're in contact with children, and to just be aware of their, how they're reacting, or if their mood is changing dramatically, then it is something to pay attention to. And so I think it's so important. And Sasha was so brave to make this film. And I am so honored to have worked on it with him, because it's truly one of the best experiences I've ever had. I think we're going on 12 films right now. And honest to God, the people you work with is really important. And I've been lucky to work with some great people, but this was really one of the best by far.
Well, Cindy, you touched on it, and it's there would be no way for it to be translated any better than it was in the home movies. But your mom stated it rather specifically when she told you or us that you were this off the charts, bright, interested kindergartner. And by first grade, you were barely able to read and write. And so, bunch of warning signs. I mean, somebody might think their kid needs glasses, but this is by watching this film, it's very, very clear that this little boy was going through something horrifying. What was it? Just so we get the timeline, you were 4? Was it 4 to?
Yeah. So it was actually like, I was just about to turn 4. I'd say 4 years old, because it's easier than however you want to say it. But yeah,
Right.
It was very, very early in my life. And, my mom, she knew something was wrong, and not in a million years could expect that it was family in the house. Just like what Cindy was talking about, before she saw this film, she's like, well, it wouldn't happen in the house, and it wouldn't happen while the mother's here. So, she thought something was wrong and someone was hurting me, but she didn't have the knowledge to understand that it could be happening in this way. But it's that's the thing is, the person that I am today, through this journey of dealing with my trauma and facing that head on, facing what scared me, facing what hurt, I was able to reclaim that brilliant little boy and build myself back up around that boy. I think that trauma, it manifests itself in so many different ways. Every human being has their own unique experience with trauma, their own unique healing journey. But I personally believe that mental health is the biggest contributing factor to whether or not somebody is able to overcome severe trauma and move forward with their lives in a healthy way. And so I think a lot of times people want to forget, or they want to move past it, or they want to say, that was the past, it's done. And I'm not a proponent of living in the past, but I'm a proponent of visiting it intentionally to understand what exists there that is preventing me from showing up beautifully in the present moment of my life. And I think that's applicable to everybody.
I do too. My head is spinning. I have so many questions, but I'm going to try to stick with the script here because there's at this point in the film, we see the 4-year-old, adorable, bright-eyed, you love me so much, Mom. I mean, you're perfect. And then
a little sweet pie.
Well, you were definitely a little sweetie pie. And then there's change. There were probably a bunch of different ways you all at Grizzly Creek and Cindy's expertise could have told this story, but the way it comes out, Sasha, it's so suspenseful. Like we don't know which one it is. We don't know why and who and how. It is like such a little big puzzle. I'm imagining that was 100% intentional, but could you talk about that some? I mean, the way the music breaks and we're all like, and then it's a journey. It's a roller coaster, suspenseful mystery.
Well, that's a great question. I mean, when I first came to Grizzly Creek Films, I had kind of a working story skeleton, and my original vision for the film that there'd be a 3-act structure where there's there's the life before abuse of Sasha, there's the struggle of Sasha in the 2nd act, and comparing the generation before Sasha with Sasha's experience, and then the 3rd act was some sort of resolution, and that was still kind of a work in progress. We actually deviated from that quite a bit in various cuts. We went back and forth with this idea of like, should we just right off the bat say, okay, there was abuse, let's get started? Should we let it unfold in the way we wanted it to, at that suspense? I really wanted the film to feel very similar to the experience that we all had, but with a lens of objectivity in kind of breaking down all of the different facets of this story that made it unfold the way it did. And I think, in terms of the timing and the way it was cut together, Avila, our editor, she did a phenomenal job. And it did take a lot of trust. I came in with a very clear idea of what I wanted, but I also had to be open to her experience through finding the footage. And, we would take a lot of time. So, she would ask for, okay, I'm going to cut something together, but I want time to do that without you looking. And then I'll show it to you and we'll talk about it. And there was a give and take. There were some things where it's like, I don't want to deviate from this at all. We got to keep it this way. And there were other pieces where I'm like, you know what? I see what you're bringing and I have to trust you here. So it was an incredible collaborative process, but we wanted it to unfold for the audience, much like it did for my mom. And we also really wanted to make sure that we weren't beating around the bush, but we were building in breaths for the audience. So whether it was something non-related to abuse that was just cute and funny, whether it was a teaser into the future of something more beautiful, a reminder that, hey, we have been in the past, but there's something beautiful ahead, stick with us, to even a direct home video moment where it's like, it's little Sasha's being like, don't give up on me yet. Like, we're here, we're doing this. So we wanted to strike that balance of not beating around the bush, but also not destroying our audience before they could make it to the finish line. And I feel like with the collaboration that we all had, Cindy's input, Avila's work, my work, Tom, Shasta, the whole team. I really feel proud of how we were able to construct this narrative.
Cindy, do you remember any strong notes that you felt really needed to be made?
Well, one of the first things I did when I came on board, because I have such a great friend and work relationship with a lot of filmmakers in New York. And, New York is, I would think, the center of documentary filmmaking, but Montana, I made 2 films out of Montana too. So there you have it. Montana's pretty hot. But anyway, we immediately got everybody to come to New York and lined it up a little theater with a bunch of editors and producers and people that I really respected their opinions, and that we're not going to sit there. What happens with filmmakers, and I see this all the time, especially with young filmmakers, is they invite a bunch of friends over and everybody goes, oh, it's fabulous, it's great, but that's really not what you want to hear. When you really get a cut together, you want to hear what's working and what's not. And a lot of people aren't brave enough to tell you that. So you get New York filmmakers in a room and they're going to tell you. And sometimes that is downright painful. But I knew in this case that it was such a good film that whatever they said was probably going to be helpful. And it was, oh my goodness, that screening and Q&A went for 2 hours. I remember the restaurant closed that we were supposed to go to. It was, well, I think, and Jen was there. I invited her in. She was the lay person, but we had a lot of industry people there, and then they rallied around this. They loved it so much that all of a sudden this group of editors are calling Avila and weighing in, and it was just here's my dog. It was just such a wonderful experience. And I think the only thing I can remember wanting to change was the talking heads at the beginning, which y'all won't see because it's not there anymore, but to sort of start with something that just grabbed you, and Avila did make that change. Avila, by the way, is just a phenomenal editor and did the most amazing job with this, because this was her first feature film as well. And it's so great to have first time filmmakers making this kind of movie that was just so powerful. It was real exciting. Honestly, the whole thing was just very exciting to work. I mean, you're working on a very difficult subject, so you're trying to find that balance where people will watch it, right? But it's also, we knew how powerful it was and how it was going to be a good film. I mean, it was good when I got a rough cut, but it got a lot better, I think, over time. And score, I mean, my goodness, the score added so much. So
yeah, the music is, I think the music is what lets you exhale. It's difficult, but you are brought in from the first second, and yet in those moments where it's just the music and video, you're like, okay, here I go. However, I kudos to the music. Todd
Griffin.
Okay. Okay. I have 2 favorite scenes. I'd like to talk about the Guinea Pig Funeral.
Yes. Happy to.
I mean, on many levels, the Guinea Pig Funeral was kind of light. You get to see that you have friends, and that's the first time we saw you with friends. Besides Becca, so they're your friends. One of them's even playing the Stones on a little guitar. But
that was me, actually.
It was?
Oh yeah, I got the Stones there for sure.
Okay. All right. You hit the ground and started playing. I didn't even know it was you. Probably I was wiping the tears, because at the Guinea Pig Funeral, as everyone who's seen the film and with us tonight knows, Sasha's guinea pig died, and you felt very, very strongly that the guinea pig not be put in a box. And while you were so serious, and that was cute and maybe in some ways light, for me, Sasha, when you looked right at your father's lens, not even above his head, right at your father's lens and said, the guinea pig needs to be free. I thought, oh my gosh, this is a boy who just wants to be free. And maybe I'm reading way more into it because I think
it was
smiling, the Guinea Pig Funeral might have had some levity in your mind. Can we talk about the Guinea Pig Funeral?
Yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, for me, it's a pretty significant piece of home video because for my personal journey, in rewatching the footage, the thing is, when someone experiences childhood sexual abuse, a lot of times the sense of self is lost to the trauma, and you don't believe that you're beautiful anymore. You think that you must have done something to deserve it. We could get into that whole thing, but essentially the loss of awareness of one's own beauty. And actually watching that footage, when we see little Sasha there burying his guinea pig, that's after all the abuse has occurred. Like I'm 8 years old there, abuse has happened, and I'm still this beautiful little kid. So for me personally, seeing that footage it's a special moment. But I remember I was in the office because I logged all of the footage on my own first. I watched every second, logged everything. And I remember that scene came up and I was like, you gotta be kidding me. And I like got out of the editing bay and I was like, hey, everybody, like, you guys gotta come see this. This is unbelievable. The depth, I think that's the other thing about early trauma is that when a child has experienced that kind of trauma, the child inadvertently is forced to grow up in a certain way faster. That's the loss of innocence. But for me, in that moment, I was gravitating towards this idea of something better after death, or something beautiful after pain. I think when I see myself then, I say that's to feel the earth in the veins. What I was trying to say is like he needs to be reabsorbed into the earth and taken back to, creation. And
that's exactly what you said.
And yeah. So, I mean, it's deep, and it's also like funny and hilarious that an 8-year-old is saying that. And even like my outfit. So I have like a tie-dye shirt, but I have military sweatpants, there are guns, but there's also a guitar. And so there was just so much complexity to that moment. We knew we needed to use it somehow. And we struggled for a long time in earlier cuts. How do you just break off into this? But I'm really happy with where it landed.
The Guinea Pig Funeral scene. Also, and then Cindy, I want to hear your thoughts about the Guinea Pig Funeral scene, but I will just say that the two little guys who were with you, who were behind you, their level of eloquence, for all the reasons that you just explained, they hadn't seen the world like you had unfortunately seen the world. They're just like, yeah, come on, Mr. Lowe's. Would have been what a normal 8-year-old would have probably been capable of doing at a guinea pig funeral when he's.
Why would you want to be buried in a box? I love that comment.
Cindy, your thoughts on the guinea pig funeral?
It's one of my favorite scenes by far. One thing that we always strive for in documentaries, if you get into a technical point here, is that you always try to put some levity in there, because usually documentaries do cover some serious subjects. But going back to Sasha and as a child and the footage that they chose, and I'd seen other things that maybe didn't make it into the film, but he had this extreme wisdom for such a young child. I mean, you see some of that in the movie, and Sasha and I have talked about things from his childhood too, which he is a very unique person. And there's something, I can't remember if this is in the trailer or not, where he just says, the 4-year-old Sasha don't give up, he's coming back. Like, what child is gonna realize that the 4-year-old person that they were before abuse is gonna come back? Like, his thoughts are so beyond even an adult's thoughts. Like, he's kind of woo-woo, Sasha. You
Yeah,
know,
well-
I mean, there's just a layer of what you say and do that it's not normal for even an adult, much less a kid. So there's something special. And I agree what Jen said when we started, that you were put on this earth to do this. As horrible as that may sound, I think if you go to Amazon and read the comments about this movie, it's astounding. I think it has more comments than almost any film out there, that any documentary, and it has touched so many people and it's helping so many people. And I've shown it to groups where all of a sudden, I mean, because these numbers are unbelievable how many kids actually do suffer abuse. And it's, you know, if you've been lucky enough to escape that in your life, then you really, it's hard to wrap your brain around it. And it's really surprising to me when I have shown the film. Inevitably, there's people in an audience, that even people I know, that suddenly disclose a very serious abuse story, you know, their father, their uncle. It's out there. And I think that we're all just a bit ignorant to think it's not. Like, you just think it's not because nobody's talking about it, but people should be talking about it. People should be making sure that their children, you know, understand what to say or do if somebody threatens them. I mean, Sasha also has a lot to say on that, and I don't.
Well, it's 50. It's you know, as the movie points out at the end, it's 15% of the children in America have suffered abuse. And right, Sasha? I mean,
and
90% of the abusers are in the home.
Are trusted by the family.
Right.
So I mean, trust, it's more insidious. It's, you know, a lot of people like to think it's a stranger with a white panel van, and it's this awful thing that comes in out of nowhere and takes us by storm. But actually, it's way more insidious than that, and it's way more premeditated than that. And you know, look, I think what's a message that's important to me is that, you know, when I juxtapose, you know, my outcome to my dad's outcome, or I juxtapose my outcome to Larry and Stuart, who were also abused as kids but didn't get any help, what we see is that when, you know, there's a lot of work to do to prevent child abuse, and we can certainly do much more than we're currently doing. And that's something that we all have to work together to try and achieve. But even with all of those best efforts, abuse is still going to happen. And so then the question is, well, how are we responding to abuse? How are we creating a society in which traumatized children are given every opportunity to heal from that trauma, so that they can grow up not only in a healthy, beautiful way in which they don't perpetuate the trauma, but so that they can actually live their lives with joy, with purpose, with meaning. You know, I'm honestly living my best life today. Like, I can honestly say that I love myself and I love my life. If I didn't have support as a child, we wouldn't be sitting here right now. So it's really vital. And it's hard for me watching, you know, some of the people that I love, you know, who are still feeling the effects of that trauma. You know, my therapeutic process, it didn't stop after I left Pennsylvania. You know, I continued even when I was, you know, a broke college student. The little money I could muster up, I stayed with it. And I think that, you know, it's important to understand that healing isn't a destination, it's a journey. And every time we heal something within ourselves, it creates an opportunity for new awareness about another piece that we could look at and work on. Not from a place of judgment of, oh, I need to fix myself, but from a place of curiosity and self-love of saying, how can I be even more functional? And, you know,
I want to make sure that we check in and talk a little bit about the other victim, Becca. What Survivor. So yeah, I mean, the scene, I think I mean, we see little Becca, but there's a scene, and it's not at the end. It's wherever it is. You've shown her the film, I think, and you guys are hugging and you're mic'd. And I you can hear their hearts pounding.
Yeah.
Now, I'm positive that that was some sound editor's choice to leave that in, but you can hear your hearts pounding, and they're fast.
We heard it when we watched the raw footage, we heard it, and then we were like, wow, okay. You know, that's a special moment.
This is going to be a multifaceted question, Sasha, but
sure.
You didn't know about Becca until you did know. And then when your mom brought you to Dr. Lustig about you found it easier to tell your mom and Dr. Lustig about her and her abuse. Am I right?
Actually, even before Dr. Lustig, pretty much the moment I realized my sister was being hurt, I said that something was happening to Becca. And that's what prompted finding Dr. Lustig. So it was more immediate than that. It was like the moment I knew that something was happening, I knew it needed to stop because I knew firsthand
what it was.
Yeah. So, you know, and it, I mean, it was hard, you know, and you see it in the film, but part of the anger that I felt as a kid, I expressed towards my sister. One, because, you know, in a way I felt like the pain that I was experiencing through disclosure was forced because I had to save her. But really, you know, as we look back at it, it's like we helped save each other. And so, I mean, that moment in the film where we're hugging, and you can hear our heartbeats, I mean, it's deep stuff, you know, it's kind of looking back at the past and recognizing it a little bit more objectively together, and from a place of perhaps more empathy and patience and emotional maturity than we had ever had respectively in our lives up until that point. So, you know, it's a special moment, and to have been able to capture it and share it in the telling of this story, I think was critical.
Is that I mean, I imagine as when your dad sent the box of videos, you knew you were going to see little Sasha, but I imagine when you saw little Becca too, it was probably as painful or even maybe more because
I mean, there's yeah.
You probably didn't notice it when you were a kid, but you see it in her little face.
Oh yeah.
As you do.
Yeah. I mean, you know, look, it is such a horrific offense to abuse a child. Rape of any form is horrific. But when a child hasn't even like developed mentally at all yet, like to start life out with this idea that you're dirty, disgusting, and unlovable, that's a huge mountain to climb way early in life. And, you know, I feel extremely fortunate to be where I am today, but I know that there are so many people out there, adults, who were abused as children who didn't have the same support or didn't even have family that believed them. And, you know, yeah, seeing little Becca, it broke my heart. Seeing little Sasha, it broke my heart because I could see very clearly what was taken, what was taken from us. But what was taken wasn't our beauty, it was our perception of our beauty. It was perception of our value, not our actual value. And that's the biggest differentiator there that's hard for survivors. They may feel dirty, disgusting, unlovable, that they've lost their value, their beauty, but it's just that they've lost their perception of that. Mm-hmm. And the challenging part is getting someone to break that trance, you know, after the trauma. And, you know, it's a lifelong journey, you know, and I think accepting that we can't change the past, but we can choose how we show up in the present moment of our lives. That's reflective of us as individuals and how we show up. But it's also important for us to then look at, okay, what do we do so that little Becca or little Sasha has even more support, so that their grandparents don't have to sell their home to afford therapy, so that every kid, no matter what their socioeconomical standpoint is, social, racial, environmental, whatever it is, that there are no barriers to great access to support so that they can move forward. I mean, you know, when I see little Becker, I see little Sasha, I see all the children in our country. And, you know, my heart does break to know that 15% of our children are going to experience what my sister and I did. But what breaks my heart even more is to know that my mental health is a statistical anomaly. It shouldn't be. Every survivor should have the opportunity to move forward and not be defined by the trauma that they experience.
Well, you have obviously incredible strength. And I want to talk about your grandfather and that marvelous moment when you're telling him you're taking his name. But just to piggyback on what you were just saying, your team, I mean, between your mom and Dr. Lustig and the detective and the DA, it's like watching a really great detective movie. And these guys they are all amazing, and you're rooting for them to get the bad guys. They are, I guess, extraordinary people. Cindy, when from rough cut to final cut, were there any things about that team that maybe made it in or didn't make it in? Or I mean, it's so hard to take the little Sasha part and put it in the present part, but I could have done a whole movie about that Dr. Lustig.
No, it was really like central casting almost. I mean, obviously it was not, and this was a real story, but the detective, you know, he was amazing. Like I don't know, you just wanted more of everybody, I thought. Except for the bad guys. But yeah, there was such a great group of people around him. And yeah. And then there was the film team who showed up at the end, which I just loved. That was a surprise. Honestly, that came at the 11th hour. Avila, suddenly I get this text like, look at your email. And they just changed like the last, 10 minutes of the film. Like, and I liked the other ending, you know, there's nothing wrong with it. We thought that was what was going to Tribeca. And all of a sudden this whirlwind of emails started coming through. Take a look. And
well,
I love it.
It was a scene that we had in earlier cuts, like way early, like 2 years ago, you know?
I'd never seen, right?
And we had all forgotten about it. And, you know, and then when Avila told me about the scene that she had worked back in, and I was like, oh my God, yes, like send it to me. And it was perfect, you know? That's a testament to Avila too, because we all, you know, we were like, this ending could be stronger, but we don't know. And I said to Avila, because she was like really struggling with it, and I was like, look, like you've looked at everything, I've looked at everything, like we've been working on this for a very long time. If you don't find that zinger that you're hoping for, like this is a great film. But she just couldn't rest on that, you know, she couldn't rest on it. And then when that scene came back, it was like, of course, like it was meant to be.
Oh my gosh, not for nothing. I mean, I do not make movies, people, but that your dad was not with you the day you were born because he's out buying a camera. And then the last scene of the film is they're packing up the camera.
Yeah.
It's perfect.
It is.
Perfect. It's so bookended.
I mean, a lot of stars had to align for this film to be what it is. And, you know, I got to say, like, any one of my family members, if they had said no to being a part of this, it wouldn't be a film that we were talking about today. So it took obviously a lot of courage. And a lot of people will say, like, I still can't understand your dad. I'm angry at your dad. And what they're forgetting is the whole reason they have the opportunity to be angry at him is because he participated fully and gave us all the footage and was behind it. So it's like, you know, the level of emotional awareness and vulnerability that we were able to bring to this film is part of why I believe it's successful.
I also don't think that people realize it took 7 years to make the film. You know,
Yeah.
I came in what, the last 2 or 3 years, last 2 years before we premiered. But yeah, they had been working on it. And, you know, I think when it came to me, y'all thought you were done, right? And it was
we were ready to be done.
yeah, I'm sure they were ready to be done, but it was, like I said, it was already good, but I looked at it and thought it could be even better. And I think that we just, you know, everybody rallied behind this team and just took it to the finish line. And, you know, but it wasn't like this happened, in a couple of years and you have this film. I mean, this was a labor of love, to say the least.
Well, it every bit shows, and every second, every sometimes hard to watch joyful second. In our remaining 5 or 6 minutes, there's been a bunch of questions coming from viewers, and I want to make sure. So how was your Uncle Howard's life change? If you know, how has his life changed since the film has come out?
Well, I don't know how his life has changed because I'm not really interested in his life, but it must have struck a chord because I got some hate mail from some of his friends at the temple, victim shaming, emails about how I must have remembered it wrong. So what, if anything, it tells me that the culture there hasn't changed, especially like Temple Emmanuel never made any statement or comment at all. That silence says more than they could ever say in a well-written $100,000 statement.
Mm-hmm.
But, you know, the footage that we found on YouTube of him gloating about his career, you know, the thing is I still wonder, like, what happened to Howard to hurt him so much that he had to inflict pain on so many other people. If he wasn't abused, then he's a true psychopath. And if he was, it must have been more horrific than anything we could ever imagine. And so, you know, the most important thing, again, for my mantra is I can't change the past. I can't control what happens around me. I can only choose how I show up in the present moment of my life. And that means being very mindful and intentional about where I put my mental and emotional energy. And thinking about Howard it's a waste of my time.
Here's another one. How do you deliver such an even-handed documentary on such a personal and emotional subject as your own abuse? What was the hardest part?
The hardest part was the raw emotion I would feel as I was making the film. And so very early on, my process became the first time I watch home video or the first time I watch a cut, a scene, I'm going to watch it for me as Sasha, the human being. I just want to feel it. And then I'm going to give myself time. I'm going to note what I felt as a human. But when I come back to this clip or this scene, now I'm going to watch it objectively as a filmmaker. And I think what's important to recognize, and what was important for me to really latch onto through the process of making this film, is that, yes, it's a therapeutic process for me personally, but my job isn't to share my therapeutic process unfiltered. My job is to use these moments and bring them together in a way with this team of filmmakers to create a film that is watchable and not just, you know, intense moment after intense moment with no narrative purpose. And I think the other piece is, you know, recognizing that my subjective experience is valid and also not the primary goal of the film. So I have to give myself the time to have the subjective experience and also make sure that I'm doing the self-care I need to do to be able to make more objective decisions and to hear objective opinions from the team that I've trusted to work with. And that was the process.
And someone wanted to know how long from the beginning, but I think, Cindy, you get 2013 to Tribeca 2019. Is that 6 years?
So the biggest issue was raising money. I mean, you know, it's not cheap to make a really good documentary. And what was more exhausting to me than directing this film was fundraising for this film. Pitching a story that's so personal and getting rejected 9 out of 10 times, every time, it was tough. But when Cindy says, it's a labor of love, it was a labor of love. I mean, I stuck with it. And I remember I met with a producer who I won't name, but early on, and I don't know what his deal was, but he just berated, he's like, you don't know anything about story. You don't know anything about structure. Just because you were abused doesn't mean you're going to have a good film. Like, there were so many people that got triggered by this topic. And instead of being emotionally present and recognizing their trigger, would show up in ways that were less than desirable. And I had to work through that too. It felt like there was a personal mountain I was climbing. There was the triggered mountain of all these different people who weren't dealing with their true emotions as I was climbing it. And then there was the fiscal part. And so, like I said, when Cindy came on board the way she did, that was the moment I could truly breathe and know that we were now, instead of, being in the thick of the deep, dark timber, like I was going to be getting to the top pretty soon. And the wisdom, the calming energy, the creativity, the resources, the connections. Our film deserved Cindy, but we're so lucky that we found her and that she found us.
That is a marvelous way. There's a bunch more questions here, but it's 8:30. I just want to say, for those at home, I want to proudly remind everyone that Rewind has been nominated for 3 Emmys this year. Outstanding Social Issue Documentary, Outstanding Direction for the director, Sasha Neulinger, and Outstanding Editing for Avila, whom you've all heard so much about. The Emmys for News and Doc will be screened at 8 p.m. on September 29th. The link to the screening is in the chat, but if you can't find it or want any help, email the Mark Twain Library and we will send you that link. I know that my fingers will be so tightly crossed. I said this at a meeting in this room this week. I said, honest and true, I cannot name a film that has moved me more. And you guys together have brought this incredible message of hope and redemption to so many adult survivors and parents out there. And so what a great way to end our job. I know. I mean, it's really something. So thank you. Thank you, Sasha. Thank you, Cindy. Thank you, everyone at home, for tuning in to our documentary series and our programming at the Mark Twain Library. This is why we do it, to bring you stuff like this. Thank you, guys, and good night. Oh, well, I'm not. Let you have a final word, Sasha, and you have a final word, Cindy, and then I'll say good night.
I was just going to say, thank you for hosting and for, continuing to be a part of the conversation. I'm so happy that Rewind is continuing to do this work, and will continue to do this work. And now that I know that I've left Rewind for the world to have, it's made this current chapter of my life so much easier to enjoy. So many people have asked, what's next? What are you doing next? And I've always been saying, like, first I need to just regroup and remember what it is to live life outside of creating such a personal doc, but to be living this beautiful life with Lauren, with my dog Rocky, to be living my life to the fullest, knowing that Rewind exists indefinitely for communities all over our country and soon to be internationally. It just feels good. So that's the happiest ending that anyone could wish for knowing my story, and I'm living it. So I'm grateful to every human being that was involved in helping me as a kid, every human being that was involved in helping me make this film. And I just think it's important for everyone to know that despite the trauma, despite whatever you've experienced in life, there is an opportunity to move forward from a place of self-love and true ability to feel joy. I'm living proof of that. And, you know, there are just no limits unless we place them on ourselves, and we don't have to do that.
Thank you. Cindy, how do you top that?
He's impossible to follow, but I just want to say that I hope people will watch this film. I have heard I talked to a young mother recently, and I was like, you should watch this film. She's like, oh, I can't watch it. She had 2 young kids. And I said, no, you really need to watch it. I said, everyone needs to watch it. I didn't think I could watch it either, but I want people to share it. I want people to encourage other people to watch it. You know, Sasha really believes it's important, the conversations you have with those young kids, and don't let them hold secrets or be threatened by someone that tells them not to tell. You know, there's a lot of things that parents can do. And I know, for one, I mean, I had 2 young daughters. It didn't even occur to me. And I feel very naive that it didn't, but I think if you see this film, it is very watchable, and it is very good. If you ask me, 3 Emmys is a lot.
Clearly, I know.
Yeah,
You're not alone.
Yeah, and it's a conversation people should be having with their children, but with their neighbors. And if you know, were worried about somebody, you know, maybe you should not ignore that feeling. You know, it's like his mother walking by the door and thinking, oh, I'm sure it's fine. You know, it's just, there's a lot of things that people just should put on their radar. And please watch this film. And thank you for joining us tonight. I really appreciate it. Thank you, Jen.
Well, thank you both. And y'all have a really good time watching those Emmys in Montana together. Everyone, they're going to be together when the Emmys are broadcast. So how's that for fun? All right. Thank you, guys. Good night, everybody.
Thank you. Night.